Okay, floods are also extreme events, obviously, and now they are increased not only because the rainfall intensity is increasing, but also because there is land use change, like urbanization and deforestation. State of Kerala, for example, experienced a severe mudslide in 2020 from the Western Ghats because they have converted parts of the natural vegetation into monocrops like rubber plantation, which actually increases the probability of landslides for a given amount of rain. Okay, so health impacts of floods and droughts are important, especially when combined with the warming and population density. The health tips from World Health Organization include making sure the drinking water is safe food is cooked well and disposed of properly. We'll look at the diseases as well. Personal hygiene, stagnant water become ponds for mosquitoes and so on. Supervision of children, cleanup, and careful about contaminated food. Right? This relates to waterborne diseases like typhoid, enteric fever, leptospirosis, salmonellosis, vector-borne diseases like malaria and dengue. India, each year after the monsoon, during the monsoon, obviously becomes a hotbed for many diseases, but floods make it much worse as well because of contamination of water sources, mixing of wastewater, contamination of food, etc. Disease is to be wary of after floods. Disease, cause, and symptoms. Okay, so we have the standard list: typhoid, hepatitis A, leptospirosis, mosquito-borne diseases like dengue, chikungunya, and malaria. And the causes: Salmonella typhi bacteria. So there is typhi and paratyphi through consumption of contaminated food and water. So street food in the monsoon season is always a bad idea. You have to be very careful. Hepatitis A is transmitted through consumption of contaminated food and water, and it's very contagious. So if you contact infected person, you can contact it directly. Exposure to water contaminated by urine from infected rodents. So that increases during the rainy season and floods. Infected Aedes and Anopheles mosquitoes. Symptoms are here: prolonged fever, headache, nausea, etc. And there are, of course, actions to prevent these also from World Health Organization. Washing hands, keeping the center evacuation clean, and the evacuation center has to be maintained as hygienic, because when huge floods come, people get displaced and they are herded into crowded places called evacuation centers. They must be very clean. Wearing protective gloves and masks and boots, and cleaning the house, boiling the water. Some diseases like cholera, for example, be avoided simply by filtering the water with clean folded saris or boiling the water and so on. Okay, that's always important. Floods also leave these kind of situations. This is from New Orleans after the Katrina. So you can see that the flood is gone, water has disappeared, but the house has now got mold inside. These are deadly molds. You can get asthma, respiratory diseases. You can die from mold, and getting rid of mold is not very easy, especially in a very humid place like New Orleans. New Orleans is hot and humid throughout the year. It's barely tolerable in the heart of winter, so that's always something to worry about. The infrastructure for health, sanitation, and available resources also matter when you have droughts. Okay, so if you look at the direct physical impacts, you have water shortages, impacts on livelihoods because of loss of agricultural production, livestock suffers, fisheries can suffer, food prices go up, displacement of people happens. This is a seasonal event in some places, like parts of northeast India, Nordeste in Brazil, parts of Africa, and they have many indirect effects as well: nutrition related, mental health, vector-borne diseases, Airborne and dust-related diseases, yes, dust and microbial loading of the dust becomes an issue. Water-related diseases, because you have limited water resources and you consume unsafe water, you mine groundwater, and it can be fluorosis, arsenic as well. Other injuries, migration-related, wildfires, droughts often are favoring wildfires, as we know from California and parts of Australia, and infrastructure leading to increased morbidity and mortality. Okay, for example, when there is a drought and there is less food available in the wild vegetation, rodents tend to invade food grain storage places, and they bring in things like hantavirus and plague. This happens even in rich countries. Yes, every year there is plague-related morbidity and mortality even in a country like the US. You think it's a dirty disease only affects Africa and Asia, but actually that's not true. Okay, so all kinds of human wildlife contacts are favored. As for trends, this is looking at 1970 to 2010. There is many ways to compute floods, coastal floods and river floods, whether it's because of increased population or increased actual water volume. So different methods all yield similar results for people exposed to river floods and coastal floods. Okay, sea level rise plays into this. Sea level rise with storms and cyclones and so on brings much more water. Inundation and storm surge is increased, especially for countries like Bangladesh, which is so close to sea level, and many of the island states, which are very vulnerable to this. World drought frequency, duration and severity during 1951 to 21. You can see here the scores in terms of plus and minus per decade. There are places where linear trends of drought severity, total drought severity score has decreased, but there are the global south again with increasing drought scores, drought severity index. Okay, so there is no good news coming anytime soon, so we have to be really careful, which means everybody has to do something to mitigate their impact on climate and watch out for the climate impacts on health and do something to mitigate the climate impacts on human health as well. All related.